Cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to figure all this out. And I'm glad we got our deal worked out because Ben texted me, and then I texted you, and then you texted me, and you're like, actually, can we go later than that? And I was like, perfect, because I in the back of my mind, I had one more horse to do that I was about to skip because I had to get up here at 6 o'clock, and yeah, so it all worked out.
This is perfect. Yeah. I'm glad you guys were easy with it. I mean, it's just right now with getting ready to leave for Scottsdale for the qualifier and all that. It's my boys, the horses, I literally was just on the phone before I called you. They just arrived in Illinois tonight, and they're getting layover, and they got to take temperatures and all that, and check everything. And I'm kind of anal about that, so I make them FaceTime me. I'm getting off the trailer and stuff like that. So it was
Gotcha.
it just the timing worked out good.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's great.
Well, good. Well, so before we get too far into it, because we are recording now, I just wanted to say that this is episode. This is 40 now, right?
Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah. 40.
This would be So this is episode 40 of On the Move, and today we have Matt Palmer with Palmer Performance Horses. Right? That's the name.
Yep, that's correct.
Correct. Awesome. And so I've been burned before talking about other people's accolades, so I'm sure we'll get into all your achievements and accolades later.
Yeah.
But Matt is you're based out of Pennsylvania right now, I think is what Kaylee was telling me.
Yeah, Elverson, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Very much on the southern tip of Pennsylvania. We're 45 minutes from Philadelphia, and we're an hour and 20 minutes from Baltimore, Maryland. So we're on the very southern tip.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And if you haven't gathered already from our conversation, Matt is a reining horse trainer, and we wanted to get him on the podcast. Your wife and my girlfriend work together, so that's kind of how I heard about you. But we wanted to get you on the podcast because, if I'm being perfectly frank, I can speak for Ben too. I don't really know anything about the reining world. And to give you like an honest, right out of the gate, pretty much the only things I know about reining is I watched all the reining at the World Equestrian Games in 2018. So I saw that, I guess,
Okay.
So very high echelon level
Yes.
from the very beginning. And then, Ben and he mentioned that we're in the, we ride horses for people. And if you had to kind of categorize us, I would say we're kind of in the horsemanship world. Like we pretty much go to as many Buck Brannaman clinics as we can and stuff like that. And so and we start colts for people. So we're kind of in that world. And again, I don't know anything about reining, but there are people in that world that condemn reining, but they condemn a lot of kind of performance horses. It's not just reining, it's a lot of different disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
And again, obviously we're not doing that, because if we wanted to do that, we wouldn't talk to you. We'd be like, we'd take one look at your Instagram and we keep going through.
No, I think we'd corner him, get about 40 minutes into this podcast, and then just kind of crack the lid on it.
Mm-hmm.
You got a good
that
there,
that would
you?
be the other alternative. We'd make you think we like are friendly at first, and then just like,
and then the sabotage would come in.
Exactly.
Then the sabotage would come in.
Exactly. So just so you know where we're coming from, and that was kind of my perspective on it. Was I was like, man, I've seen some reining from, again, the World Equestrian Games, and then I've heard people who I know are not reiners bash reining. So, and so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at, but it sounds
that's probably like soccer players bashing football players. Same type thing, One kicks a little round ball, the other one tackles people.
Yeah, and again, I don't know anything about reining, but I do know some things about other disciplines, and we can get into it a lot more. But the general trend is like horsemanship people think that performance horse people, whatever discipline it is, that they think that those people are using not the correct means to like do whatever. But then the performance people not incorrectly look at horsemanship people and be like, well, they're not really getting anything done with their horses, right? And so there's some middle ground in there where it's okay, you have to get some stuff done with your horses, but you also, you can't be like abusing all your horses. You probably wouldn't get very far if you're just out there abusing all your horses.
No, I mean, in anything, you can be a one-trick pony and get by one time, but I think like any good coach, any good athlete, I think if there's structure, a good foundation, if there's a learning process there, that's longevity. And there's no way that you can go aggressively, do aggressive things, because after a while, like any human, you can tell them and yell at them, and they could be at a job and you can yell at them, and that might motivate them for a certain amount of time. And then after a while, they're just going to throw their hands up and say, I quit. Well, the same thing for a horse. So if a reining horse can get ridden by a 70-year-old lady that doesn't know what she's doing, and the thing can spin 4 times both ways, she puts her right leg there and that thing lopes off in the left lead, and that horse is 15 years old. It's the only way it got to that point. And if it's a 15-year-old horse and a 7-year-old lady that's riding it, and she can lope off on both leads, make that thing turn around both ways and say, whoa, and it slides, was that horse had to be ridden and trained and had so much structure in its life. There's no way any hillbilly tactics of being aggressive or sparring or putting some big old bit in its mouth, that's not going to work. I mean, that horse is going to give up at some point. But if that horse is willing to do that at that point in its life when it's 15 years old, and then also have somebody that's not an advanced rider be able to push those buttons correctly, that's because somebody actually got into that horse's brain a little bit and made them a structured human being to a structured horse. I put it that way. So mentally, that horse is so focused because it was taught the right way. And I think I think anything is a good discipline. I think you can learn from any discipline. I've learned so many things from all kinds of disciplines. And I think if you're a horseman enough to think that way, I think that amazing things can happen in any discipline. But I think you have to be open-minded enough to try to get into the horse's brain first. And when you can do that, that's the most amazing thing why I love reining, because they can go on. I mean, what horses do they use on the racetrack? Well, if that horse is beat into submission or done whatever somebody thinks, or not good horsemanship tact, or whatever the case is, that horse wouldn't be on the racetrack leading American Pharoah to the racetrack. It's an ex-reiner. There's a lot of things that's just for reining. But I think as a horseman, I think anytime you can learn from any discipline, I do myself. I don't think that any good horseman puts one discipline into one thing, because I don't think that that's getting yourself to be a better horseman.
When it comes to looking at other disciplines, is there one that stands out above others that you draw from outside of your own?
I would lie if I said there was. In 2010, funny story about different disciplines, we'll put it that way. 2010, I was a pretty young guy, and I made the World Equestrian Games team. And we were in Lexington, Kentucky. The USA got to hold the games. And we would eat lunch in this big, giant lunchroom, and the riders were the only one, and then your significant others. Well, at that time, I was single. And my Uncle John was my significant other. He was my date everywhere we went, to all the parties, all different things. And I remember I met a young man that was from, I think he was from overseas, and he did the, if I'm not mistaken, his name was Mufasa, and he did the endurance thing where they go for days, where they have to, what is it, 3-day eventing? Wife's here, 3-day eventing. And I told him, I said, Mufasa, we were sitting at lunch one day, and my Uncle John's like, we have this horse that has a quarter crack that we just can't heal. And every reining pleasure horse, every Eddie Blacksmith came around, and make a long story short, he ended up coming after the World Equestrian Games, and he literally fixed this quarter crack for us. And in my world, in the reining, pleasure horses, roping, all the guys I knew, here I am in Lexington, Kentucky at the Olympic Games, and this guy knows what he does, and he fixed it. And I'm sitting there perplexed, listening to him talk about, what we did, how we got it fixed. And then the next thing I know, I'm sitting at another table 3 days later. And when Mufasa came, that was after the games. But then I'm sitting there and I'm talking to some of the dressage people, and I'm saying, man, I'm so amazed by how you guys get your horses. Because in reining pattern, we got to do 2 large fast or 1 large fast, a small slow. But if we do 2 large fast, we have to change leads out of a small slow. And I was so amazed by how they made those horses lead change like that in the dressage. So, I sat there and I asked a couple questions, and I said, talked to a trainer, and we had a 2-hour conversation one night, just drinking a Jack and Coke outside at our hotel. And I learned so much about that. So what I'm getting at as a whole is, I don't think if you want to be a good horseman, you can learn anything. So for me, I love everything. Yeah. Anything that has to do with horses, I'm there. I'll watch it. I love it. So, if it comes to dressage, I can pick something up. If it comes from cutting, comes from, horsemanship, comes from rein cow horse, comes from, you name it, the hunter jumpers. I'm mesmerized by anybody that's good at their craft on horses. So I wouldn't say that I'm a fan of any of them. I'm a fan of learning anything I can learn to become a better horseman. And there's 2 different scenarios in my life that help me out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. There's people that know their shit. And then if you discount that because there's a bunch of other stuff that you don't agree with, you kind of miss the tree for the forest, and you can miss out on so much if you're just so damn picky.
Better.
Yeah. Like that guy that the corner cracker, I'm sure. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, like you get into
he literally put it, the thing I remember, it looked like a gun went off.
Yeah.
And he blew the quarter clack through. Now, I don't know exactly the ingredients he put in there because, like he said, I wouldn't be skilled enough to do that. But how he fixed it was incredible. And that horse was sound. It's been sound. I think it's in my uncle's pasture still. It's 23 years old. So, I mean, incredible. I just think if you want to be a good horseman in anything you do, I think if you're open-minded enough, like any good athlete in the world, all the golfers talk to football players about their conditioning, what they do. I think when you do that and you love horses, I think anything that somebody's good at, it's so fun to watch them do it. And I'm a firm believer in that, boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We named this podcast On the Move, and kind of the whole theme of that was that we're not trying to stand still. We're always trying to get better. And that's why we call it On the Move. But yeah, 100% what you said about different horse disciplines, and people who are good at what they do tend to be very interested in other people that are good at what they do, right? Like anyone who is I'd say there's most like American males that are overachieving in anything that they do in life. They probably have at least like gone down the rabbit hole of like who Michael Jordan is or Tiger Woods or something like that.
Without a question.
People who like have really, really achieved something. But yeah, that's a good perspective to have. And the more we talk to people, and we've been fortunate to talk to different folks who are good at their craft, that does seem to be a general trend, is they're interested in other people that are good at their craft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. I think that if you're open-minded enough and you're willing to take one positive thing from every discipline that you can learn from and listen to any type of horseman, just because you have accolades and awards doesn't, just because you're on TV or just because, we get to go show for $1 million, we're no different than the old time cowboy that knows so many doctor and remedies to so many things about colt starting. So it's not about the winning and losing. I think at the end of the day, it's about the product that you put out. It's like, Ben and I were talking. He said, "Well, I'm starting some horses. I would think you guys feel the same way, both of you. I think the biggest thing is when you can train a horse, and that horse, somebody calls you up 10 years later, and they say, "Hey, you had this horse," and the first words out of their mouth is, "I just want to tell you that I love Lily, or I love Sam." Those two horses you trained 10 years ago, and now it's in the fifth party's hands, and they still say how much they love the horse. I think that is what you search for, because I think that's the most rewarding thing, is to train these horses so we can enjoy them, but that other people can enjoy them, and that it comes back 10 years later about how much what you did with your product, and how rewarding that is. I think as a horseman is probably the thing that, even all the winning, the showing, the money, the accolades, I think that's my number one thing that I love the most and that's what I strive for every day, because I think that's the coolest thing in the world. When you see that. I can tell you today, my mom, she has these ladies, right? I say, "Mom, what do she has these ladies' nights, and it's a gypsy vanner. And anyway, I trained this damn gypsy vanner to turn around, and it could stop a little bit, and it lopes around. And the lady is my mom's, one of her best girlfriends. She's been with my mom 40 years. I mean, before I was ever born, taking lessons. And she never got away from gypsy vanner. She knows nothing about reining horses, but she comes in and taking lessons off my mom's before. And anyway, she has this gypsy vanner, and she has MS. And I took this gypsy vanner. I mean, I think Petey's probably 11 now. And I took this gypsy vanner when he was 3, and we made him learn how to lope on the correct lead, learn how to step around, steer for, say, well, he'd stop. And, now Petey's, it's probably 8 years later, and Best MS is getting worse, but Petey's still going around. She was loping Petey today with her MS, and she only can ride for about 10 minutes. And, Petey's steering everywhere she needs to go. And I think sometimes that's as cool as the $350,000, $400,000 horse that I sell or win on. I think Petey's probably one of the coolest things too. So I think that's the funnest part about horses and the people that you meet around it.
Yeah.
That's an awesome story. And the other cool thing about that, you talk about the horse ending up in the fifth party's hands or whatever. If you can have the positive impact to give that horse the education early on, not only are you helping the people and helping them to have a rewarding relationship with their horse, but that horse, you're pretty much guaranteeing them a good life, right? I don't know about Ben, but I've got a couple horses that have been through several hands, and I'm kind of the end of the line. I'm either going to get this thing rode or he's going to Mexico. And that's the situation. And if you can get that done, we're okay, we, even if he's not, like you said, not going to be tearing it up and being this crazy horse with all these accolades, if we can get this thing gentle enough that somebody can get on it, go around and be safe, that means that horse has a job for the rest of his life, and it means that horse has a place to live for the rest of his life.
It's a wonderful way to think. Yeah. That's a wonderful way to think, my friend. I agree with that 100%. And I think we need to think about that a lot more, about horses and where we're going and things like that. I think that's 100%. I love that. I love that.
So let's back up a minute, because I want to get more into you and stuff. But I think a good segue from there, again, I don't know a lot about the reining world, but my understanding is if you're going to be a trainer in pretty much any of the Western performance, whether it's reining or the reined cow horse or anything like that, or cutting, you're going to be taking in a lot of horses. And, probably, I assume you probably do futurities and things like that.
Yes.
So that's got to be, someone who it appears that you really care about the horses. That's got to be kind of a tough balance to strike when you have all these horses coming in, because the reality of it is, I'm sure that not every horse that comes through the door is going to go like light on fire at a futurity, right? So how do you manage, it's just, I imagine it would be a lot like I ran track in high school, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so there's like, I have enough friends that went to Division I track programs because track was very big at my high school. And it was kind of understood at this higher level of high school track that you could pretty much take like a 16-year-old and you, for like a distance event, and you could basically just run them into the ground for like a season or a year. And they would go and like they'd win a state championship and they'd have all these accolades. But then they'd go to the collegiate level and it was because they were way overtraining while they were young. That's why they got all these accolades. And then everyone's training caught up when they went to the collegiate level. And it was like, oh, he wasn't a genetic phenom. He was just running 30 more miles a week than everyone else. And now he's got stress fractures in his shins and all this other stuff.
Yes.
And again, I imagine it's probably that can happen in a world where you have new colts coming in, and it's like, I'm sure everyone thinks that their horse is going to light it on fire and be the best horse you've ever ridden. So it's got to be really tough. Like, I imagine you almost end up in a situation sometimes where you have to kind of be an advocate for the horse and be like, hey, look, this isn't his lot in life, but it doesn't mean he's worthless.
Whoa, without a question. I mean, that's I mean, to step into what you're saying, and then we can get into a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I keep 35 horses in training. I probably have a group of 6 or 7 2-year-olds. I have 2-year-olds, that's when we first start them. They're 2-year-old year. So usually we start them in January, and then we start them, and that's usually just beginning stages. As you guys know, that's getting the saddle on their back, and then I don't put any of my horses in a snaffle for the first 3 months. They're just in a bosal, hackamore. I keep them in a hackamore. As their 2-year-old year evolves, then, that's usually when I start seeing about their ability, where they're at, how their mind is, case may be. And then going into their 3-year-old year is a big step. January going into their 3-year-old year, because our futurities start in the late summer. There's a lot that goes into that. And you're exactly right. Unfortunately, years pass, but now NRHA, our association, is doing amazing strides for the horses. I mean, what we're doing now is incredible. So we have all this money in the 4-year-old money now. So there is some that are those athletes, that are just not capable enough as 3-year-olds to go show against the bigger, stronger, more athletic horses. Doesn't mean they're not just as good. But in years past, we might have pushed them a little bit to try to get them there. Well, now as horsemen, we have great horsemen in our industry we're making great strides. And now the most amazing part is, okay, if they don't make it as a 3-year-old, we just keep taking our time. They come along a little slower. Now we're showing for the same amount of money as 4-year-olds. Now our Derby year used to go to 6 years ago when I was growing up. Now our Derby year goes to 7. So our Derby season goes from 4 to 7. And then after the 7-year-old, we have 8 and up money now. So we've evolved in our industry, just like other industries have. We've evolved now that as we want to be better horsemen like any other discipline, because it's the truth. I mean, there's just certain horses that some of the best horses I ever sat on in my life didn't bloom until they were 5. So, but if you would have pushed them at a young age, it just wouldn't work out. And I think that just goes as being a horseman. I mean, listen, it's just like every NFL player. There's the good ones that do the right things, and there's the ones that, charity and do all the right things. And then there's the ones that get in trouble on the news and it's bad. Well, same as horse trainers, same as your guys' world. There's good starters. There's guys that do what you guys do, riding the horses, breaking them out, trying to make them. And then there's guys that just ain't good at it. And they probably shouldn't have their card. They probably shouldn't have their shingle out there saying they're a horse trainer. I think the biggest thing is if you love horses is number one. And if you take care of them, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I'm blessed. I mean, I have such a backing behind me. Excuse me, boys. How to answer that? That's the horses getting to Illinois. I got to go show it the Run for a Million, so they have to go to Illinois to Arizona. But anyway, to be a good horseman, I think I'm lucky. I got Ice Horse sponsors me. I got Magna Wave. I got to Beamer blankets to everything. So all my horses, every day they get done riding, they're iced. Their manes and tails are done. They're Magna Wave. They go into a spa, and I think that same as that 16-year-old kid in high school. Maybe if they weren't pushed as hard and they were also maintained after their workouts, maybe then they wouldn't just be blown apart. And I think if you take that philosophy as us, because I played baseball, you ran track. If we take those philosophy into horse training, and learn by those mistakes as human beings and then relate that into horses, I think you can solve a lot of problems and a lot of less bullshit will happen in this world as horses and horse trainers. And I think you could really see a lot more horses go on. And there's ones that ain't going to be reining horses. It happens all the time. And we say, okay, it's going to be a ranch rider. Maybe it's just going to be a trail horse. But it's still going to be a great trail horse for Susie May that wants to go ride the thing down the trail. Just because it's not a reining horse doesn't mean it's a piece of crap. Maybe that's just not its life's calling. I mean, shoot, my buddy wants his kid to be a baseball player. The kid can't even hit a baseball off the broadside of a barn. But, I mean, damn, the kid can sure knock away on the keyboard. I mean, so he's probably the next damn Mozart. But he ain't going to be the next, Lenny Dykstra or the next Nolan Ryan. The kid just stinks. But he's great at another craft. So I think if you think of horses that way, I think beautiful things can happen. And I think that's about being a good horseman. And I am very passionate about that. And that's kind of how I think about my horses. If they're not going to make it, I'm going to tell the owner, hey, place this horse somewhere else. And I'll recommend them somewhere else, another discipline or reining or something. I think it's the best way to go. I really do. I think, but I think when you try to push them to that degree, or you got to pay your bills like a lot of guys do, I think that's when you go down the rabbit hole of not doing the right thing as horsemen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And then if we don't, I don't know if you could say if we don't police our own, because I don't know how you go about that necessarily, but eventually somebody will do it.
You can't.
Somebody will step in, or PA gets involved, makes it hard on everybody, but something will happen. What has been the driving factor in the mindset change in the reining horse world, as far as like extending the time that a horse needs to, kind of progress and grow up if they're not making it? Or has there been anybody in particular pushing that thought?
I wouldn't say that. No, I mean, I think the biggest thing about it is, we've learned over generations by great horsemen in the past. I mean, the guys that were there in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and different things. And I think as a whole, as an equine industry, I wouldn't even call it reining. I would call it an equine industry. I think that we've learned more about our horses, how to take care of them, how to do things. And I think, all the way around, I think we're blessed because we have so many people. We wouldn't be here if there wasn't a love for horses and people that love horses, all three of us, and I think it's a whole as an equine community, and even in the reining, that we just offer all these different classes to better our industry, and be able to say, hey, if this horse isn't ready, you know what, there's another year and there's another amount of money that it can go for when it's mature and it's ready enough to do that. And I think I've seen that over all the different disciplines. And I think as horsemen and horsewomen, I think where we're going is pretty damn cool. I'm pretty excited to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. With information being so easy to share. And I mean, more and more, nobody's going to want to be an asshole, be some jerk trainer that everybody says stuff about. Just makes sense that you'd want to fall in line and do your best. But, Matt, so something I'm very curious about, because when Joe said we were going to have you on, he mentioned your name, and then I was telling you, I was looking at your Instagram before we started the podcast. It kind of goes back quite a little ways for me with like with horses. Growing up, I'd read magazines and stuff. I didn't grow up around horses, and so in the magazines, typically you see a lot of Western sports. In Western sport horse magazines, you see pretty successful trainers, and you see their trucks or their trailers, or you see them at shows, and you see these people in these magazines. And as a kid, I thought, that's pretty cool. Those people look like they made it. Look like they're, having fun and balling. And then you grow up, and then, me getting into wanting to work with horses, you start to figure out there's people that pay for horses and there's people that get paid to work with horses. And unless you're really rich and have another job, you don't want to be on the side where you pay to have horses. So you're trying to be on the side where you get paid to work with horses. And then the majority of those people, you're not necessarily balling, right? You're eating beans out of a can and living month to month. You say you love it. And I got friends who, they're like, I'd work with horses if I had to live in a cardboard box. I just love doing this and helping people. And you kind of look at them and you think, yeah, well, eventually you're going to want more than a cardboard box. So
yeah,
when I see a guy like you, it's like, hey, there's one of those guys. And to this day, like we said before, of course, me and Joe do something different than you do in the horse industry. But to this day, when I see a guy like you, I go, oh, there's one of those guys that seem like they're kind of making it in the horse industry, and they got the nice truck and they got a bunch of horses they're riding. And, obviously I've seen some of your credentials. You've won quite a bit. And, so all to say, when I look at that picture, I'm real curious because I'm like, as a kid, wanting to get into horses, I know how my journey's going so far, and there's ups and downs, but I love what I do. So a guy like you, I'm like, I wonder what his story's like, because it looks like he's having some fun and having a good time. And so I'm real curious about that, and I'm glad we have you on here to just chat about stuff, because so far so good. I'm excited. This is going great. My first question is along those lines. Did you grow up around horses, or did you want to get into this, like from a different kind of background?
No, I had, when I grew up, we had, I wouldn't call it a shack, but it was kind of a small place. I mean, it was, we had a little 5-stall barn, and our backyard, which would be a normal person's backyard, we cut into a ring, and, we had a little 4-acre place, not even, I think it might've been 3 acres. And, we put a little fence on the other side. We turned our horses out. And my mom gave lessons out there. And my mom always had the horses. My father, he was from a pretty rough neighborhood outside of Philadelphia called Chester, Pennsylvania. It was the projects back then. And, he loved horses. He used to hitchhike from there, and he would go and clean stalls at my mom's place where her father was and her mother. And, he fell in love with horses. And that's how my mom and dad met. And, my old man got out of Nam and showed up at an English horse show with his horse in the back of the truck. And my mom said, "Cowboy, I think you're in the wrong place." So, came from a long line of people that, they fell in love, they got married, but I came from a long line of people that we loved horses. We just, we did what we could. And, that I always loved. I've ridden all my life since I was 1. I started riding reiners when I was 9. And then after that, I just kind of, my old man and I, when I was 10, 11, 12, he would buy some reject kind of reiners, as we call them, for $1,000, 500, whatever the case may be. And he'd tell me, if you want to go make them, and go learn. And, damn it if I didn't. When I was a kid, after that, I sold a couple. I bought my first reiner my first real reiner, bought when I was 13, and I rode with Bill Horn. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Bill Horn, but he's a legend in our business. Hall of Famer, one of the greatest cowboys ever. I rode with Bill Horn and Kim Horn when I was a young man. I was blessed to do that. Got to ride with a lot of other great horsemen along the way. And so my passion was always there. But we did with what we had, and then we moved and built a little 10-stall barn, and that's how I got my first car, was wheeling and dealing, selling horses. And, since I was a kid, man, it was in my blood. I loved it. Like, I just loved it. I loved riding. I loved doing it. Played baseball, that kind of thing. But, horses was always such a passion. It was just so cool. Like I always watched the John Wayne movies with my pop, and I said, Dad, I want to be a cowboy like that. I mean, it was just so neat. So yeah, my story started real young, but where I'm at now from where we started is I tell my wife every day, even when we're struggling sometimes with bills and buying hay and doing things, I said, baby, I tell my mom I wouldn't trade anything. I mean, I just love what I do. So yeah, it always looks like you're making it, but we all have our struggles. But that's where I started. But it was always because I loved it. It was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because there must have been a point where you kind of, sat down and thought to yourself, damn, I'm paying the bills, riding horses, and then showing horses, and I'm sure all the people you've met and the places you've traveled and stuff like that. But
been blessed?
Yeah,
man.
What was the first time you showed and you made some earnings?
16. I was 16. And back then, when I was a kid showing reining horses, that was kind of not the thing to do. Basically, you should have stayed in the youth class. And at that point, I showed a horse called Greyhound's Last Slide. And I said to Dad, my boots are wearing out, and I kind of want to get a new headstall. And he said, well, I don't know. You're going to have to go home and mow the damn lawn or something like that and do a couple other things. I said, Dad, but this is at the show. Like, we're at the show. And back then, there was no damn UPS. Or, I don't even know if there was, but they weren't mailing it to me.
Yeah.
So he said, well, how much money you got? I said, well, I got $450. He said, well, how much is it? I said, between the boots, the headstall, the splint boots, this, that. I said, it's $500. He said, well, you got your $50 short. And I said, well, yeah, but I really want it. And he's like, well, you want to gamble on yourself? I said, what do you mean? So there's a 2,000 added non-pro in Raleigh, North Carolina. Entry fee was, back then, I think it was like $150. He said, now if you win, you're going to win $1,250. And he's like, I'll let you keep it. I won't make you pay for the stall and shavings if you win. But you got to put your own money up. I said, well, if I lose, Dad, then I ain't going to be able to buy none of it. And he said, well, put your money up. So my first time I ever showed for an amount of money, I was 16 years old. And I ended up winning that 2,000 added non-pro. And I got my boots, my headstall, my splint boots. And I even bought a pair of skid boots then, too. I felt like I was balling. So that was my first time ever competing for a little bit of money. But my old man said, put the money where your mouth is, boy. So that's my grassroots kind of getting into it. My old man was a hard ass. So, but I wouldn't want any other way, because I don't think I'd be here without how stern he was on me.
Shoot, that's a great story. And that is a great dad. Instead of putting up the money for you to say, hey, here's your chance, gamble on yourself. It's up to you. That's great.
Kind of be like, if you want a rodeo. You want to get on the bull, you crazy son of a bitch, get on. You want to make the money.
Yeah,
it's kind of the same thing. It was just in the reining world, and that was back in the '90s. So that was pretty cool.
Wow, boy, that's great.
That's awesome. And I bet on the inside he was like jumping up and down when you won, because like as a father, you kind of you get two sides of the coin, right? You either get like, well, sometimes you gamble and lose, and all that stuff. But then if you win, it's like, well, now that this kid's going to be just so much more confident in himself. That's going to be like, I'm sure that was a very pivotal moment in what you viewed you could accomplish going forward.
Yeah, it was, but he was different. He was a different duck, man. My father passed away now. It's going to be 4 years, and with cancer, he died at 66, and it was mind blowing because we never even knew he was sick. But my dad was different. I remember that day till forever. When it was 16, we were in. I know he was happy, but he didn't show it to me. because he said, well, he's like, and it was a statement that he made to me, and it stuck with me my whole life, boys. He said, you know what, son, it's real easy to get on top of the mountain, but it's real hard to stay up there. And that was the thing that he said to me at my first win when I was 16. It's real easy to get on top of the mountain, but it's real hard to stay up there. And it wasn't like congratulations. It was like, hey, you did a good job, but it's real easy to get up there. It's really, you know, I don't know. It sticks with me to this day. You know, I think about that, and damn it, if it ain't truth about what I'm doing now, man, that was words of wisdom. You know, and I think that was the good Lord up above or something like that when he made that statement, because I live by that every day now. You know, it's real easy to get up there, but it's hard to stay there, and makes a lot of sense. And that was my first money win. Was 16 years old.
Some interesting comment to have made. What's your I don't know how to ask that exactly, but what would you say is the trajectory of what you're doing now? And do you feel like you're still trying to get to the mountaintop? I mean, yeah. And what's your mindset like when you think about that? Because that's kind of a mouthful. You know, it's easy to climb the mountain. It's hard to stay up there. How much does that kind of bother you to think about? Like, boy, I hope I win this year. Hope I don't start going down. Because what if you thought you were on the incline and you think you're climbing, and every year you think, hey, I'm nowhere near the top. I'm still on my way up. And then you have a loss for whatever reason. And then maybe you think to yourself, well, I wonder if I already went over the top and I'm going down the other side. Like, you don't really know. Does that ever happen to you?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, anytime I think that you're doing anything, golfing, doing whatever. I mean, I was just watching that thing on Netflix. It's called Full Swing. And the one part was one of the guy's dads was his golf coach. And he said, you know, he's beating himself up. He hasn't had the last couple good rounds. You know, he hasn't had the last couple good showings on the tour. And, you know, he's trying to fix this. He's trying to fix that. And he said, sometimes he's like, I have to tell him. And I thought this was pretty interesting. He has to say, well, you know, you're pretty damn good to be doing where you're at right now. Sometimes you got to realize that and not beat up on yourself. And, I definitely don't think I've reached my pinnacle. I mean, in our industry, a very big milestone is to become $1 million rider. And I'm 100 and something thousand away, 160 or 70,000 away from being $1 million rider. And that's a very big thing in our industry. That was something that I've dreamt about as a kid. It's a big accomplishment. And so, yeah, there's been some good things. I mean, last year going to the Run for $1 Million, that was amazing. I mean, Taylor Sheridan putting that deal on in Vegas, and the TV show that goes with it, and the exposure that reining has gotten on Yellowstone, the whole thing that has evolved. But I didn't there was 16 of us and I was 16th, you know what I mean? And instead of leaving there feeling accomplished, I felt they're devastated. And, you know, you have to bounce back. And after that show, I bounced back in a big way at some of our other shows, and you know, we won some good events and stuff like that. So I think the biggest thing is, yeah, it is getting up on top of that mountain, and it is not wanting to come back down. But I think the biggest thing is it comes down to not letting the highs get too high and thinking that, you know, you figured it all out, or you figured this out or that, and not letting the lows get too low. I think the biggest thing in all that is you love what you're doing. You love riding these horses, winning and losing, whatever that is. But it's really becoming a better horseman that, you know what, just because you didn't win that reining that day, maybe you made really great strides on that horse. Maybe that horse, it might not be as good as some of the other horses that you went against, but maybe you got everything out of that horse that day, that where its ability and where its mindset was at that time, maturity wise. And you might have, in our score, you know, anything above a 218 is a really good score in our industry. Say you go there and mark a 218, but a lot of guys marked a 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, but you marked an 18. But you got everything out of that horse that day, and you didn't overly cook him. You didn't overly push him. So I think it's not about the trophies all the time. I think it's about if you're smart upstairs as a horseman and you say, you know what, I got everything out of this horse this day without pushing him past the point, as we talked about earlier, about a young age, about doing things that might not benefit his future. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not always about the wins and losses. It's about what you did along that way. And I think if you can put it in that perspective, I think you can stay pretty even keel along your whole career, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to becoming $1 million rider, like what, I don't know enough about your world, but what are some of the factors that would need to come into play for a competitor, a rider, to reach that mark? And also, is like in every sport, you know, there's different things that level the playing field. And in yours, like, is money a factor? Like, if someone had no money, would it be much harder than a guy with money? Because maybe they could, I don't know, if you could buy your way, or you could buy horses, someone else is training and you're just riding them, but you still kind of get the credit? Or is it really a pretty level playing field for anybody getting into it?
I think it's a level playing field, but it's tough because, yeah, I mean, the guys that have made it or have really become huge in our industry, I get you. I mean, it's like anything. I mean, it's like Aaron Rodgers right now. He's all over the news. He's going to go to the Jets. You know, he's won one Super Bowl, but he's kind of made it, right, boys? And they're about to pay him a chunk full of change. And Aaron Rodgers is, I don't know how old he is, but I'm sure he's 35, 36. So, I mean, probably in the NFL, he's got another 4 years. But I'm a Bengals fan, and we're about to pay Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow's got 12, 14 years left in his career. So I think with us, it's definitely one of those things that the guys that have made it in the show pen, things like that, yeah, they're going to get they earned the right to get those horses bought. So young guys like you know, Joe, I mean, just like what you do in your craft, we got to get that one horse that's really good, and we have to break it, make it, stamp it, and get it in the show pen and make noise when we get there. We got to step up. No matter, like my horses, we're going from Elverson, Pennsylvania, all the way to the Arizona and Scottsdale. It's a 3-day trip on them. They have to stop 3 times, 3 days to get all the way out there. Well, a lot of guys want to go show against are 20 minutes down the road in Scottsdale. We have to make that trek, but when you go there, you got to make noise. And I just think that, yeah, those guys, it's going to happen in any kind of industry. The guys that have made it, done that, yeah, they're going to have the customers that are going to buy them the horses. They're going to have the things that are going to happen that way. But that's no excuse. You know, there's going to be that one horse that you ride, Ben, or that one horse that you ride, Joe, that when you're breaking it out and you're doing things that you're going to say, damn, this thing's electric. This isn't normal. This ain't little Timbo in the back or little Tommy in the back that I ride that I'm trying to fix. This thing, there's a gift to it. Well, in the reining, you get that one that you get to ride and break out, and it has the gift. That's your career changer right there. So I think that's the biggest thing. So now, I mean, it comes down to us, I think.
And by making noise, are you meaning just go out there and light it up, or after
light it up?
Okay, but
yeah,
so that's all you got to do is put on a show, or do you have to do anything beyond that? Like, could you go and just smoke the crap out of it, but then if you just kind of hide in the shadows and go home, then like nobody remembers you, or that's going to take care of itself? Like, how much self publicity?
No, you go in there.
You're just winning.
You go in there and you go in there and you put a show on and you put the maneuvers all together. You turn a one, circle a one, you know, stop a one. You know, you do some electric things that, you know, as a horseman, as anybody, it's like kind of like watching reining cow horse or watching jumpers, you know, watching the world's greatest, you know, jumpers jump those jumps. I mean, oh my God, I would never try to do that. I mean, I don't have balls big enough to try to do those jumps. Yeah. You know what I mean? But when you go watch the reining, you watch that thing run down there and stop, and it says, whoa, and the crowd erupts, and that thing just snaps in two and rolls back the other way. I mean, it's when you can put all those maneuvers together and you can put on a show, and you got to travel across the country. You got to do whatever you got to do, or you just starting out and you just go to your local affiliate and you put on a show and say Ben goes in there and I give him reining horse. He just starts clicking. He comes up for a month's worth of lessons and he starts clicking. And next thing you know, I said, Ben, we're going to go and do a reining pattern. Let's get ready. And somehow the inner horseman comes in him and he puts on a show and he goes in there and turns big, circles big, stops big. Now all of a sudden people are going to say, well, damn, who's that young man? That's just like going and watching, a college kid play baseball. He wants to get drafted. He goes and puts on a show. If you don't put on a show, you can just be bypassed and you actually could be the better athlete. You could be the whole better baseball player, but you didn't showcase your talents when it was time. So yeah. I think that's the thing about it. You got to showcase.
Well, so one of the things I'm getting at is, like Joe preempted earlier, there's some viewpoints from the style of horsemanship we do compared to what you do. And one of those viewpoints is that there's a lot of politics involved in the reining world. And I know some people that would look at the reining world and say, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. You try to get in there and, make it big. And if you don't know the right people and have the right politics, you're just not going to succeed. Do you think there's any weight to that?
No, I honestly don't. I'm a kid from Pennsylvania. All the big guys, everybody that's really big is in Texas, Oklahoma, I'm a PA kid. I'm an East Coast cowboy. I don't. I think we have such a great scoring system now, and those judges, if they don't judge it correctly, they got to go answer. There is no escaping. It's just like umpires in Major League Baseball. There is no escaping now. I think where that could get misconstrued is they think that they have to go buy the horse for all the big money. Man, we've had some horses that were bought for $5,000 in our industry that are now $1 million sires.
Yeah.
So no. I think a lot of things and times in life like that, I think it's people scared to take that leap. I think I really do. I don't think it has anything to do with it. And shoot, I would love it to say it would be politics or something like that, because I would love to say I got screwed on a score or something like that. But I don't honestly, gentlemen, I don't think that's the case. I think anything you want to be good at life, you gotta take the safety vest off. And no matter what it is, and I think you need to put yourself out there. And I think that people that don't think that way, probably don't get to see a lot of other beautiful things on the other side of the horse world. You know what I mean? If they think that just because of money or politics or this or that, I don't see it at all. I think our sport's the most beautiful thing because you can't. You can't. The guy that just won the non-pro futurity hasn't showed in not know how many years. I didn't even know who he was. Guy just won it. Who was he, babe? He won all the levels. So I might just get Ben on a damn reining horse to go put him in there, and everybody's going to know who Ben is. It's just one of those things. It's the most beautiful sport in the world. Anybody can do it, but that's the coolest thing about it. It really is. That's why I love it. I see a lot of young men or some guys that start. I have a guy that comes to me now. He's in his 40s. He's wanting to be a reining horse trainer. He's colt breaker, rides horses, problem solving, that kind of thing. Wants to get in the reining. Hell of a horseman. Really good. And I think he's going to be a really good reiner. And he just said, hey, I wanted a new passion. I wanted to push myself. And I welcome him in the open arms. He comes for a lesson every week. So that's the beautiful thing about our sport. It's pretty damn cool.
And you make a good point there. It's a pretty convenient truth to have like the system or everyone else has the problem or everything's rigged against you. Like if that was the case, wouldn't life be a lot easier? Because it's just so absolute. It's like, well, there's no point in trying now.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. But we have a scoring system. And if you get caught not doing the scoring system and we have AA, AAA, single A judges, just like Major League Baseball. So, I mean, if our sport in the direction that it is going to be the neatest thing in the world because the little man can win. That's a beautiful thing. Little man can be in the run for $1 million one day or whatever the case may be, but the little man can do it. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about reining and where it's going. And I think that's why it's drawing so many cowboys in, so many cowgirls in, so many horse people in, and why it's erupted. I mean, it's on Yellowstone. We have the Run for $1 Million. We have the Last Cowboy. I mean, it's so beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and I think it's because anybody can do
it. So yeah, talk about that for a second, because I don't know much. I know what Yellowstone is, but Kaylee mentioned that you.
I hope you know what Yellowstone is. I love that show.
Man, that's a whole different conversation Ben and I have had. I'm super late to the whole Yellowstone thing. Like Ben,
I'm get him on this. Take care of your buddy. Get him on this.
I told Kaylee to have him watch The Last Cowboy.
Oh, Joe. Hannah said she told Kaylee to watch The Last Cowboy.
You just gotta hide your eyes. You gotta hide your eyes when Taylor Sheridan rides, though. Other than that, you're good.
So yeah, Joe would really enjoy that.
So Hannah says that she told Kaylee that you would really enjoy it, Joe.
All right, cool. Well, I'll jot that down. But you were on a TV show though, right?
Yeah, we were on a TV show. So
what was that all about? Because I mean, I can tell you're already being very humble about it, that's great. But like, what? So why were you on a TV show? What was like the whole premise of the deal?
Ben's grinning over there right now. I like that we could see each other. The premise was it's called the Run for $1 Million. So you have to qualify. There was 16 of us that got to qualify. So there was 6 spots in Vegas, that were that you could qualify for in Vegas. So that would have been in August when the actual Run for $1 Million. So 6 spots were available. Then there was 10 spots left available, which I'm going to. This is whole new year going, but there was 10 spots available in Scottsdale. So 16 riders get to go to Vegas. Taylor Sheridan created this. I mean, he's been amazing for our sport. He created it. 16 riders, the best riders in the world, get to compete for $1 million in Las Vegas. One ride, one shot, one moment. You're there for that. And with that, he created a TV show on CMT called The Last Cowboy. And all because of Taylor. I mean, the guy's been unreal in our sport because of that. I mean, what he's done for reining, cutting, rein cow horse, it's mind-blowing. I mean, I used to have to tell people when I would be doing something, they'd say, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" I ride reining horses. "Oh, what's that? Barrel racing or rodeo?" I'm like, yeah. Like, I mean, I didn't even want to explain it. You know what I mean? And now if I go somewhere and then I go see my doctor the other day because I told him that my shoulder was hurting. And I mean, I come back and it's not my doctor. It's a nurse practitioner. So, "Well, what do you do for a living?" I'm like, "Oh, I ride horses." "Oh, what kind of horses do you ride?" I'm like, "Oh, here we go." I'm like, reining horses. "Well, what's that?" I'm like, "Did you ever see Yellowstone?" "Oh my God, my husband and I love that. I ever see the horses running?" "Yeah, and they spin, they do that." I'm like, that's what I do. So now reining has evolved in when you say, "What do you do, reining?" "Oh, like Yellowstone?" "Yeah, exactly." So they get it now and the public gets it. So Taylor created this event for us, Run for $1 Million TV show. It's called The Last Cowboy, and it follows our lives. Follows Hannah and my lives, my mom's life, following going into this event to go run for $1 million. Because, dude, if you would have told me 4 years ago that I could go run for $1 million on a reining horse, I would have told Joe and Ben that you were the kookiest rednecks I've ever met in my life, and there would be no way that this could possibly happen. But somehow, Taylor Sheridan has created an event that we get to go ride for $1 million. And awesome visionary, awesome. I mean, look what just happened the other night with the Americana deal, where what was it? Oh, American Performance Horse, where it was at the Texas Ranger Stadium, where Rein cow horse, cutting, and reining went off in the Texas Rangers Stadium before the National Finals Rodeo? Oh, before the American Rodeo. I mean, think about that. And they're showing those events because these guys, and that wasn't Taylor's deal. That was Teton Ridge, but where Taylor got us, and now and the rest people that are falling in love with it is nuts. And there are 3 different disciplines, 3 different Western disciplines. So, and I always felt like, the Western deal in my area, English is big, so the last Cowboy to the Run for a Million. I mean, the publicity that it's done for our sport is nuts. It's nuts. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah. No doubt he's great. Influenced horse sales and all parts of the Western industry, including, stores and retail of boots and hats and all that stuff. But I'll fair warn you, in the cowboy world, so when you're watching Yellowstone and they're sitting around and then they're doing reining patterns in the arena, like there's no working ranch in Montana where they're out there running reining patterns. So that's where Yellowstone's very entertaining. But like, again, from our world, if I'm in the store and someone's like, oh, I like your hat, and you're like, thanks, me too. And they're like, oh yeah, I love Yellowstone. Is that like Yellowstone? Like they think maybe you're wearing a hat because you watched Yellowstone. And I always say, well, no, it's cool, isn't it? Yeah, they finally made a show about us cowboys. Because and then they might say something like, oh, do you do that thing where you run and slide? And then we have to explain that we don't. And that or like if someone asks you what you do, like we'll have a roping sometimes, or we're working cattle, and maybe a neighbor or somebody will invite them over to come by for the day, and they're like, oh, do you do stuff like they do in Yellowstone? And you have to actually explain the opposite, and you're like, no, we actually we're just working the cattle, and it's a slow, quiet, peaceful activity where it's all about least amount of movement for most working of the cows, and everything's low stress, and we maximize our energy and our effort to get the job done with the least dust as possible. And there's a whole other explanation that has to come into play on our side of things.
Yes. Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, it's I don't think that anything can be I think everything's a little bit different than, reining. We don't just go run and stop and all that at a place and, bid on a horse or whatever the case may be. But I think that as a whole, I think it's a beautiful thing in a way that there's actually a light on what we're doing, because I don't think it was appreciated. I mean, I know that we have, in the reining, we put things out there about protecting the harvest, protecting, the cowboys, protecting the cattle. I mean, for doing all the things that we're doing as people that love the Western discipline, love the cowboys. I think that we need to be seen about the work that we're putting in and the things that we're doing. I mean, I think the cowboy before all this, I mean, being a cowboy was like, now country music's the biggest thing. Now all these things are the biggest thing. And I think there's a lot of good in everything that's come out of it. But I think that, people are a little bit misunderstood about like what you're talking about, Ben, you know what I mean? And I think that, I think people like yourself, I think that, just by being here with you guys tonight, it's been awesome. I think that, you can kind of guide them in the right direction on like exactly what it is and what it isn't. And, I think with that, but I think as a whole and everything that's going on for the horse industry, for the cowboys, for everything, I think it's all a benefit for us where it's all going, because without that, I mean, we were a dying breed, huh, boys? I mean,
yeah, I tend to agree with you, Matt. I think it's a situation where Yellowstone, for kind of the whole Western industry, has been like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Because I'll tell you right now, this is how I finally decided I got to watch this Yellowstone show, because my dad absolutely loves it. My dad loves Yellowstone, and I've sat down and watched a couple episodes with him. and I did like have a chuckle every now and then because like my dad, his whole life has run our cattle ranch, right? And
Yeah.
he's like sitting there watching Yellowstone, thinking it's so cool. And I sit down and watch an episode or two with him, and I was like, this is like not what a real ranch is like, in like at all, right? And like and it's this guy who's been doing it for 40 years, and I'm kind of chuckling at him, but like the alternative to that is now I've got relatives who like they came over for Thanksgiving, and they've never really been interested in what like for example, my mother married my dad and was like, oh, she ran off with the rancher, you know, and her father was like an engineer. They lived in town and they were like respectable people, and then she was the
Yeah.
horse girl that married the rancher. And that's just kind of what it was. And it was like, oh, that just side of the family, they're just horse nuts, and there's nothing you can do for them, nothing you can. But then, like, they came over for Thanksgiving because we kind of have like a round robin deal, and they were like genuinely interested in what was going on in the ranch, and like interested in the cattle. And now there's grandkids, like the generation below
Yeah.
me. The grandkids are like running around, like messing with the ropes and stuff because Yellowstone, and like that's awesome, right? Like you said, that kind of publicity is needed.
I think Joe, I agree with you 1,000,000,000%. I mean, and I think Ben gets it too. And I know what Ben's saying. I mean, but it's like, okay, for love of the game, Kevin Costner. I played baseball. In college. I know every step. I got hurt. I was hoping to go further in baseball. Ended up getting hurt. Are you fucking kidding me? Kevin Costner, for love of the game. And it doesn't even come close to baseball. Doesn't even come close. But I love the movie. I'm a baseball guy. I love the movie, but you know what that did? Major League Baseball had a whole bunch of tickets sold. I mean, things were great. So I think that just because they didn't get it right all the way, in the movie of how baseball was actually portrayed, I think that I think it's a beautiful thing that as a whole, as us as horsemen, I think it's a great thing for where we're going and what we're doing, and that's kind of how it's helped us out so much in the reining and any kind of Western discipline. I mean, my buddies that are all baseball guys, they're more like not, they have nothing to do with the horses, and now all of a sudden they come out and watch me ride. They don't know what they're watching, but they come out and watch me ride. You know what I mean? And I just think that it's a beautiful thing because of Ben and Joe and myself, like guys like us, we love horses. We love being around it. We love doing it. And I agree with you, Joe. I think that maybe if we can influence, just because a little kid saw that show or watched something else, and we can influence them to want to be the horseman, I think, damn, we only live on this earth once, and that's leaving a legacy. So take what we can get, and I think everything that's going on right now as a whole is nothing but a positive.
Yeah, and hopefully the little kids are influenced by the right part of that show. But for sure, Matt,
Yeah.
like we 100% as a culture owe so much to the horse, right? They built our civilization, and we've been using them for thousands of years. So it's pretty neat if you look at the timeline of history that in the last 50 to 100 years, the tables turned. Now the horse is kind of being carried on the backs of men. It's totally flipped. And even to your point, within the last couple of years, to have a show like Yellowstone, take it and push it that much farther for all their problems and inaccuracies and whatnot, because you're going to have that, like your Kevin Costner example in the baseball movie.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to see the horse get lifted up like that. And everybody loves horses even more. And because we owe it to them. They've done a hell of a lot. And I think that's why, like when Joe and I and you were talking about just even these totally like awful horses we get in for training, where you think, gosh, this thing maybe he should go to Mexico. Well, maybe not Mexico, maybe just a local place here that'll take care of a horse. You still have a little feeling in you where you're like, gosh, I wish I could make it work out for him. because you just appreciate them. You know, we don't need them anymore for work. And then some of us are working and making our livings from them still, but in a different way. And so, yeah, when you sit there and the Yellowstone music comes on and dun dun dun, you know, they're riding around, and yeah, for sure, you feel kind of proud, right?
We were forgotten.
Yeah,
yeah, we were forgotten. I mean,
Yeah.
I know we know that we. I mean, what was it? Oh, shoot, when were the last like good cowboy movies that were made? I mean, well, we started this thing an hour ago
Yeah.
about me talking about John Wayne.
Well, and
You know what I mean?
I grew up watching Bonanza.
Like, really,
yeah,
think about it. You know what I mean? And now it's a beautiful thing that
yeah,
that you know, you walk around the airport and you go somewhere and people are wearing cowboy boots.
Yeah.
And they're wearing even if it ain't their fault, just because they don't really know what we're doing and what it's about. I think it's beautiful that if they get a pair of cowboy boots, get a pair of cinched jeans, why not? Like, I mean, if they see it and they love it, I think it's great. Otherwise, where are we leaving our generation if the kids don't know about it? Because Ben, you said you didn't grow up in a horse world.
No.
Correct? No. So you didn't grow up, on the back of a horse, or you weren't going out there and feeding the horse when you were 5, 6 years old and mucking the stall.
Well, we had a lot
right?
of animals. I wasn't in the horse, like predominant like horse training world, but we had some horses and stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
It definitely wasn't.
Yeah, but
it wasn't like it is now, where horses are the focus. Horses are your living, and you're pushing that in your life all the time. Yeah, and even like, yeah, the way that the only thing that I think I was alluding to earlier is that it is neat, though, that there is a certain group of people that even if Yellowstone didn't come along, would have kept on being cowboys in ambiguity.
Oh, yeah.
And so definitely shout out to them. And those are, I think that probably hopefully would have been us three, not to like puff ourselves up, because there's a lot better hands than us. But
yes.
But you'd like to think, even if Yellowstone didn't come along, that you would just be like, well, I guess the world doesn't care about cowboys or horses, but whatever, screw them. Let's keep riding and having fun. And so Yellowstone is cool that it happened on top of that. But no doubt, I think when you do hear stuff from people where they're like, oh, that stupid show or whatever, maybe they haven't thought about it in relative terms like we are, and kind of looking at it from a few different angles. And even they may not even be aware how much that show is helping their business. Maybe they just think we're having like a big horse boom right now and they're not doing the math. But I think that's where their thoughts coming from is like, well, I was already a cowboy. Like, how come why do you guys think you all are cowboys too now? And they're kind of missing it, you know?
I think that goes back to our conversation earlier. I mean, doesn't that go back to our conversation earlier as being a good horseman? I think a good horseman, and to be good at what you do, no matter what you're striving to be good at, you're probably the most open-minded person. Because if you're not open-minded, that means you might let something slip through that you can put in your notebook. If you're not open-minded and you don't want to keep your mind open and listen to all angles, then you probably are going to not you could probably better yourself that much faster. So I think if you're open-minded, and I think if all those people are open-minded, I think that you can better yourself really quickly and in all angles of life, not even just horses. I think sometimes you got to see both sides of what we're looking at, and I think if you think that way, I think a lot of good things happen to you.
Yeah, we had a guest on here one time, and he said it in a way that resonated with me. He wanted to be like a particular horseman that Joe and I know of, a guy named Tom Dorrance. You probably have heard his name, right? Father of natural horsemanship. And he knew Tom and rode with him a lot. And he really wanted to be like Tom Dorrance. And he said that he keeps an open mind, and, anything he sees, he tries to learn from it. And he keeps a very open mind because he wants to be just like Tom Dorrance. And there's a lot of people that have a particular person they want to be like, and then they only, I don't think there's anything wrong with following a person, having a mentor, right? But they filter their entire life through like the head of a needle, and that head of that needle is that individual because they want to be like that individual. And this friend of ours was saying that he realized he needed to have self-awareness, the ability to adapt, a broad scope, right, to take in all kinds of information and weigh it against what he's learned so he could be like that one individual. And I got to thinking, well, it must have been because that one individual he wanted to be like was open-minded and humble. And so it wasn't that he was trying to attain a certain skill like the one person. He was trying to become open-minded and learn and constantly be on the move and humble like that one person.
I think that's awesome. I mean, I can tell you right now, if I came to your guys' place and I watched you, wouldn't. The difference is, I think if you are open minded, you're going to go into something like that, and you're going to go into something and you're going to watch Joe, and you're going to watch Joe do what he does, and you're going to watch him go through the steps, and then if I go to Ben, I'm going to go to watch what Ben does. I'm going to go through the steps and I'm going to watch. But the difference is, if you're open-minded, you're not going to be, when you walk into a situation like that, you're not going to be judgmental. No, you're going to walk into a situation like that and you're going to sit there and say, okay, I'm not judging. I'm just seeing what he's doing, and I'm going to see the result that he's going to get at, not just on that one ride or that horse. I might spend the whole day there. I might spend 2 days there, but I'm going to see how they go through their daily day. And maybe as I could watch that whole 2 days that I'm at your place, at both your places, and I pick up one thing from Joe and one thing from Ben, and I take that home and I put that into my program riding reining horses, that might win me something major. And I think that's being open-minded as horsemen.
Yeah.
Open-minded in everything you do.
And you can find it so many places. I told Joe a couple weeks ago, I was scrolling, again, Instagram of all places, and there was a picture of a friend of ours, young guy. I think he's a little younger than me. And Joe and I both know him. And he was sitting on a horse. It was just a picture of him sitting on a horse, like in a group of cattle. And something about the way he was sitting, it pricked my mind. And I thought, damn, I don't sit that balanced on a horse. And for the rest of the day, I couldn't help but think about my friend and how he was sitting on his horse. It was just a still photo, and it changed the way I ride. And I don't know, I didn't necessarily try to sit like him, but it made me think about my seat because it stood out to me. That photo of him, it looked good because he was sitting just in the middle of that horse. And I don't a lot of times. And it changed my life, in a teeny little itty bitty increment in my journey. But nevertheless, I needed that. I needed that next sheet of paper to get set on the stack, right? To get it just that much taller. And I remember telling Joe about that and thinking, I'm just glad I ran across that today because it changed my life.
I think that's awesome. I mean, I can tell you right now, I do the same thing. I mean, and sometimes my wife gets a little mad at me. I'll tell you right now, like when I'm done with you guys, I'm gonna study some video. I'm gonna study video of me just showing in Florida things that, I mean, it was a good show, but oh man, I left a lot of stuff out there on the table, and I'm gonna go study it. And I think when you do those things and you structure yourself in that, just like Jordan did, as Joe said it earlier, just as we talk about Jordan or Nolan Ryan or Brady or any of those guys, my God, boys, those boys were so structured. I mean, they were insane, mentally, physically demanding of it wasn't that they didn't give a shit about the crowd, the trophies, the wins. They wanted to be the best at what they did. And I think that's pretty cool, Ben, that you sat there and you saw a photo and you said, you know what? Yeah, I'm not doing that. And my buddy here is doing it. And I think that's hats off. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it only goes to show, not like that was some, you know, I'm not just learning from photos these days, but to me, it went to show that
No,
you
I
should pay
get it.
attention, right? Because it's not going to be necessarily a lesson with your mentor or some video or even watching a video of yourself, but it could be a photo. Might even be something someone says sometime. And if you think you're so great where you don't ever hear anybody else talk, you just hear yourself talk and you listen to them to know when they're done so you can speak, you're going to miss a lot. And the more you can shut off that part of your brain and turn on the learning side, the better you're going to be. And that's a struggle for me, but I'm always trying to do that more and more and constantly be aware and think, what are they really saying? Because maybe I'm going to learn something instead of just being like my dad used to say, use your head for more than the hat rack, you know?
Yeah, I think, but you know what? You're already on the right path right there because you're thinking about that. I mean, my old man used to say when you walk in, you're interacting at an event or when you're talking to people and you're in a room. My old man used to say the loudest man in the room was the weakest man in the room. You know, and the hell does that mean? Loudest man in the room is the weakest man in the room? And it resonated not so much about that comment, but what resonated was that sometimes you got to put your ego aside. You got to just sit back and internalize things and learn. And I think that goes back to this whole this whole evening that we've been talking about becoming a better horseman. I think if you take all those things into perspective, I think that your riding, your horse training is just going to go quicker. You're going to ride shorter. I mean, I rode 2 of my NRBC horses. The NRBC is in Tulsa. It's a huge event, and it's coming up in April, right after the Run for a Million deal here. And I rode 2 of mine, and my mom was out there giving lessons. It took me 2 of my horses. I rode them in a half hour each. Boom, boom. Wasn't anything bad. It wasn't. I mean, my mom jogged them, she had them warmed up. Everything was that. Half an hour, I got right to the point. But I was confident in what I was doing with that horse. I knew where I wanted to go with it. And as I knew where I wanted to go with it, that relayed in what I was doing with them. And it took me a half an hour, and they were done, and they barely worked a sweat. And that goes back to the very first beginning of us talking, Joe, about that 16-year-old that was in track that was pushed harder than everybody else. But if you think that way in horse training, where you can make that picture clearer to them, then all of a sudden you're not pushing them like that 16-year-old track person that looked like a phenom, but they actually really weren't. They were just pushing harder than everybody else. So I think if you take those things, and I think that way when I horse train, loudest man in the room is the weakest man in the room. So sometimes you got to sit back and you got to think about what you're doing, and you can get right to the problem a lot quicker. And then when you're confident in getting to that problem, but you're quiet about it, next thing you know, it just relays into the horse and what you're trying to do. I think that is us, as all 3 of us as young men are all searching for. At least I know I am.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And Ben, I don't think this was on the podcast, but if this is a conversation you and I had once. So obviously in our world, a big person you've probably also heard of is Ray Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about just talking about what people looked like on horses, and we were talking about what Ray Hunt looked like on a horse. And a comment Ben made to me that I've thought about a lot, which is one of the reasons it's great to have peers you can have these conversations with. But Ben was talking about Ray. It's like it was like he was so confident with what he wanted to get done with that horse, he wasn't even argumentative about it. You know, you just watch him, and he's like, I'm not like, even if there's a little resistance here, resistance there, like, I'm not going to be upset about it, because I'm so confident in me, and I'm so confident in you. I know this is what we're going to get done. And that, at least for me, like when you're young and starting out, and I, um, I had a mentor of mine, like when we talked about this, he said you have like white man's disease or John Wayne's disease. Like you get your mind stuck on something, you're like, well, come hell or high water, we're gonna get this shit done. And it doesn't matter how many horses we got to jack up to get it done, right? But then if you are like Ray, in some of those videos where he's just so confident, he's like, well, I'm not argumentative about this. Just like, we're going to work through this, and this is what we're going to get done, and then this is the next thing we're going to do, and then we're going to put your feet over here, and then we're going to put your feet over here, and then we're going to canter here, and then we're going to stop, and now I'm going to like wave this flag at this colt, and it's not going to bother you because we're confident, and it's all good. And like that's kind of the same deal. I mean, it is the same deal, right? Like he wasn't loud, he was just confident, and typically, you go to a bar on like a Friday night and there's like this guy out there like talking shit and doing all this stuff. It's probably because there's something in him that he feels like he's got to do that to kind of justify his existence a little bit. He's not okay with just sitting there watching the game with his buddies and, making a comment here or there to add to the conversation. He's got to be the life of the party. And there's some insecurity in him that says if he doesn't do that, he's going to be less.
Well, I agree with that. And I think what you're talking about, Ray Hunt, I don't really know him. I've heard the name, but I think the biggest thing is it's not being confident in the way that you wake up and you say, okay, I'm going to be confident today. I'm going to go ride this horse and I'm going to know what I'm doing. And you know what? My boots look good. My hat looked good. I feel good today. I had a good cup of coffee. I'm confident. No, it doesn't work that way. Confidence, if you're talking about Ray Hunt, and I'm not I've heard the name, but I'm not, I don't know a lot. But I would probably think where his confidence came from is the studying, the taking the notes, the bettering himself. Everything that we've talked about all night, gentlemen, about being open-minded. I think when all those things come together, then you put the work in and the research in. So when you're riding correctly. When I'm riding, I think everything. I think about where my body is. I think about how I'm sitting on that horse, where my leg pressure is, how I'm using my hand. If my body is even tailing a little bit in the saddle, because in the reining, if you move just a little bit, something bad can happen and you're done. Your day's over. So every day I go to work, I think about my alignment where I'm at. I think about before I get on my horse, I make sure my saddle, I make sure everything is perfect, make sure my pad's in the right place, and make sure they wrap their legs correctly. I make sure everything. I make sure their feet are taped so they don't pull a shoe off. I make sure all the little things that go into it. But I think about all those things and I check them off my list. And then when I'm not good at horse training, I go back and I reevaluate what I did wrong leading up to that event and why I think that might have happened. And as I dissect that, that's the hope I can get to. That I hope I can get to that 30-minute ride, 40-minute ride, and confidently get off of that horse and say, you know what, I got into its brain. And sometimes it might not happen that day the way I wanted it. I've won so many rein-ins where the night before, I feel like that horse didn't stop that well or turn that well. And 9 times out of 10, when they actually did good the next day, if I kept going and trying to make it better, usually turned out to be a rack of shit. If I actually just stopped myself, took a deep breath, and said, you know what? I put all this other work in. Tonight's just not the night. I do believe it's going to get better tomorrow. And then somehow I looked like terrible the night before. and I go and I win the reining the next day. But I knew when to quit. So I think the biggest thing about that is that you can be confident because you put the work in. And if you put the work in, and it's not just us talking on a podcast, but we actually get up and do it, I believe that's when good shit happens. Because I hate barroom talkers. I hate that shit. I hate that shit. I put your money where your mouth is. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't. That's not my deal. I truly believe. It really comes down to, and that's like Ben's comment. He's like, it looks like you're doing good. It looks like you're one of those. Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed. I've been fortunate, but I'm nowhere near where I should be in my career. I feel like I should be way better. I feel like I've left a lot on the table. And every day I go to work, I'm going to keep working at it. You know what I mean? So Instagram's cool, all those things. But at the end of the day, Facebook, the wins, it's all good. But at the end of the day, I want to know I got into that horse's brain and I actually problem solved. And I think that goes with what you guys like to do too, problem solving, getting into their brain, making it better. But a lot of it, I focus on myself first. If I'm not mechanically doing it right on the horse, well, then how the hell am I going to teach it correctly? If I'm not sitting right, using my hands correctly, using my body position correctly, how the hell am I going to teach the thing correct? So I think a lot of that goes in, and I'm very passionate about that. So I don't mean too passionate about it, but I'm very passionate about that because I believe that's the key to success. At least that's what I think.
100%, man. That's the whole point of this podcast is we like people that are passionate about what they do. So, yeah, I'm all for it. You're not talking too much or anything with us.
Yeah.
Good. Sorry if I was, but when I get around some guys I enjoy, I can I can go at it all night. It's just one of those things when you feed off of one another. It's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. No, we couldn't agree more with you, and it's been enjoyable.
Definitely has.
So like I said, I feel the same way. We could probably talk all night, but we want to let you get some film study in tonight. So we're going to wrap up here, but Matt, it's really been a pleasure having you on the podcast, and we'll definitely have to get you back on. Me personally, I don't really have a doubt in my mind you'll get to be that $1 million rider soon. So,
thank you, boys.
Maybe once you get that done, we will just piggyback off of that fame and clout.
Let's hope I get this run for $1 million qualified.
Yeah.
We got the big one out in Scottsdale next week, and there's 10 spots available left. And hopefully, if we get qualified, you boys got to come out to Vegas and watch it in August. That'd be a blast. And we can have some fun in Vegas. But this one coming up is a big deal. So
hell yeah, we ought to do a podcast. We'll get you and Joe and me and Taylor Sheridan. The four of us.
Well, we could maybe we could sneak him in. He's a great dude.
We might let him come on our show.
we want to see him do a little more though, get a little more on the move first, and kind of prove himself.
Yeah,
if he's of the right quality, then maybe.
I'll let him know when I see him next week. I'll tell him. I'll say, hey, I got 2 boys now. They said they might let you on the show if I can get the right string. So guys, it's been amazing. It's been a pleasure to be on your podcast, and I appreciate you just having me on.
Yeah, and go ahead before we sign off here. Go ahead and plug yourself if people want to follow you on Instagram or anything like that. See what you're doing, or maybe they're in the Pennsylvania area, want to get into reining. Where should they find you?
Oh shit! I'd be a liar if I told you. My wife and mom handle all that. All I do let me do is ride. But I know if you go on Facebook, my wife tells me that's the only thing I know. But it's Palmer Performance Horses. I know on Facebook, Palmer Performance Horses on Instagram. Just follow us on there, and just check it out. It's a lot of fun, and we have a lot of big shows coming up. But it's one of those things, boys, that I would love to have you guys out to the farm too. If you're get a chance to get in Pennsylvania there and come out and see the farm, I'd love to have you out. We'll go out for a steak. Good little shanty shack right around the corner that has a good steak. And love to have you guys out. So you have to see if you can make it down to PA.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, thanks everyone for listening. And that is episode 40 with Matt Palmer of Palmer Performance Horses. See you guys.